right. What's good, y'all? Hope everybody's well. Like, share, subscribe, join, donate, hit the hype, support the show so we can continue to bring you these independent black male thoughts. Hope everybody's doing well today. I wanted to talk about something I've talked about several times before, but really with a different point of emphasis. But before I do, I want to start with a bit of a public service announcement. And that has to do with the women out there that do get it, and I do want to applaud some of those women who do. This is an example. Check this out.
Black fathers don't get enough credit. You always hear about them not showing up, or child support always seems to be in the same sentence with black fathers. And there are a lot of black fathers out there who are very present in their son and daughter's lives. My husband is one of them. And even within the sport, it just doesn't get enough recognition. So that was one of my goals, to show how hands-on these fathers are. They really love their children.
And shouts out to Mr. Virgil, men like that, that's mentors, that's stepping into those roles, that's stepping into those roles of fathers that have made past or might be in the penitentiary or anything, and teaching that these young men to be men. So to be a man, you have to know a man to be a man, and these are the men that we know. So I think
I can't do that. As a woman, I know there's certain things I cannot teach my son, and I will step back and let him. And then as a mom, I will give both of them a soft place to land. Right. So the film really shows that. I'm very proud of the work.
All right. So, I didn't look into the film. I'm kind of in a hurry. I just wanted to drop that real quick. Shout out to those that do recognize what men are doing. It's a bit of a rarity at times, but it is what it is. All right. Now, moving on. Today, I want to talk a little bit about abuse. And I want to talk about it in terms of what black men experience. And I've talked about it before, but I notice that, when having these conversations, a lot of people check out. Because, of course, these aren't the kind of things that we, men are interested in hearing about. But here's the reason that I want to cover this today, right? Because I've talked before about how women can commit unchecked violence, and there's very little public condemnation of it, right? There's no sense that it's a threat. Women treat it as a one-off, or, when they see a violent woman, oh, that doesn't happen, and which isn't true. It's just the public sentiment. And then, of course, if you look at Tommy Curry's work on the Duluth model, and he explains how this model was created, how its creators even withdrew from using it, and it created the sentiment, really, or popularized the sentiment that all violence inherently comes from males. It comes from male culture, it comes from patriarchy, so on and so forth, which has been used in such fashion that women don't get held accountable, right? But the aspect of it that I want to kind of cover today has to do with men avoiding the traps, the traps that women and feminists in particular have kind of constructed around men dealing with violence, not initiating violence, but responding to violence. See, this is what tends to happen. Men find themselves in trouble when they respond to violence. And I want to kind of motivate brothers who have to deal with it in some form or fashion to be very strategic about how they go about it. But in order to do that, we're going to look at how different types of violence, violent situations occur. So apparently, I don't know who this person is, but this is a video of rapper reality star Bianca Bonney and her boyfriend. All right, check it out.
Why you always worry about my badass bitches?
What up? I'm tired of you. I'm tired of you. I'm tired of you.
Yo,
I'm tired of you.
yo,
I'm tired of you.
yo, bro, why you snuffy?
All right. Well, hopefully there won't be a copyright issue with the music there, but you guys saw what it was. This is what I mean when I say women initiate violence far more often than not. And if in fact, according to numerous studies, they initiate violence more so than men, right? They're just not held accountable for it in the same kind of way. And of course, men have been socialized to either not respond or to respond and end up being the one in cuffs, right? Some of the data shows that men tend to do more damage when women tend to use objects, men tend to use their hands. These are the kind of things that we've heard about for the longest. And as much as I'm a supporter of men defending themselves, right? at the same time, these are the kind of situations that end up getting used against you. So there are two basic solutions to this. One, make sure you record as often as possible, whenever there's even the possibility of a problem. And two, only use violence in self-defense, but in many instances, just leave. And I say that because often we're the ones that get arrested, even in self-defense. And so I really want to hype this up. I really want to get this understood, because there's too many brothers that get locked up even when defending themselves. Now, he started laughing, and I think for some men, that's, a way of, trying to mitigate their own anger, to make sure they don't snap. And I have known brothers who've snapped. I've heard a number of stories where Black men have talked about, being in a situation, being struck, being attacked, and responding even outside of their own head. And the problem with that is, making a choice where the next 30 seconds can have you locked up for years and you don't even fully remember it. I used to have that kind of anger. Like, even when I was a kid, I would get so angry that I would black out. And I don't mean that I would pass out. I mean, I would black out, meaning, and it used to happen when I would get in fights, right? I would just get so angry I'd black out. And the next thing I know, I'd be sitting in the principal's office and there'd be an ambulance outside and there'd be a kid going to the hospital. And honestly, I couldn't even remember what I did, right? That's dangerous. That's one of the reasons that I started playing football. I started playing Pop Warner football in California, right? The pads, the helmets, the whole deal, to work out some of that aggression. Because I would get so angry and I would black out, and I wouldn't know what I did. I think I sent at least two kids in the hospital. And it wasn't just, I just ran up to some kids and attacked them. It was fighting. It started as a fight. There was, you remember in elementary school, it would start with pushing. Well, first it would start with talking, and then you'd start by pushing each other and talking, and then there'd be a crowd would run around y'all and start yelling, and it would go from there, But there were instances that didn't happen all the time where I'd black out, but it did happen a couple of times when I got too angry, and I had no filter on how much violence to commit, And I'm just lucky I didn't do any. Well, I won't say I didn't do any permanent damage. I have no evidence of that, but I do know I didn't kill anybody, and I'm grateful for that. But it can happen very easily in those kind of situations. When you black out and you have no memory of what you do, yeah, you can seriously hurt or delete somebody. And when it comes to women who initiate violence, knowing that more than likely you're stronger than her, and of course, demonstrating the ultimate disrespect, it can be very easy to black out. And so I want to warn brothers, you want to record and you want to get out of the altercation. You want to leave if at all possible. Violence needs to be the last resort, and that should only be in self-defense. But even then, it can still work against you. And I want brothers to be extremely careful about how we engage in that, because we often don't get any support. Now, there are different types of violence, and I need to be clear about that too. Let me see where I can pull this up. Okay. So check this out. So this is a bit of a strange case, to be honest with you. I didn't even really know where to place this one, but I will call it a certain type of violence. It's not hands-on as we just saw, but it is different, and it does deal with, somebody being threatened. So check this out. This is Yahoo News. Woman allegedly refused to accept breakup, charged after police say she broke into the man's home. All right. Saturday, July 12th, right, 2026. You can see her there. Very pretty as far as I'm concerned, but, hey. Montgomery County woman has been charged with burglary and stalking after police say she repeatedly broke into the home of a man she had briefly dated, allegedly refusing to accept that their relationship had ended. Lindsay Harris, 30, of Lower Gwinnett, met the victim on a dating app Match in January 2026. The two had connected online about 6 months before the relationship began, according to the station. But the man ultimately decided not to continue seeing her. Harris, however, wanted to continue the relationship and went to the man's home, where she not only broke in, but also brought along a bottle of wine and ice water. According to a police official identified as Whitney in comments to NBC 10, the man returned home to find her standing outside looking at him through his sliding glass door and immediately called 911, according to the station. The victim told NBC 10 that items in his home had appeared to be moved or out of place for weeks leading up to the confrontation. Officers arriving at the scene found Harris crawling through a window, according to police. It is a felony to go into someone's house and break in, right? Harris was charged with burglary, stalking, criminal trespass, and harassment. She was preliminarily arraigned before on-call District Judge Daniel Baranowski, who set her bail at 10% of $50,000. Police said Harris has since posted bail. Attempts by NBC 10 to reach Harris for comment were unsuccessful, according to the station. Charges against Harris remain allegations, and she's presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. What do they got to prove exactly? They found her in the house. So imagine, fellas, you meet a woman on Match or some other, dating site, and she's been coming to your house for weeks and you don't know about it. Walking around your house, right? And this is the kind of woman that could show up long after you've fallen asleep and just, be standing over you in your bedroom, staring at you at night and then leaving. You know what I mean? But she apparently has been coming to his house for weeks. And then after the breakup decides to come through. Now, again, that's not direct violence, but it's a form of violence that we can talk about because it's, it's a form of stalking. And it could easily go left if she decides to attack you, particularly in your sleep. Now, this is obviously one of those situations where, and I warn men in general, you should have an alarm system. You should have a security system, where everything's locked down. But at the end of the day, these are the kind of things that can happen, right? So there are different types of violence, if you will. And I think it's important that men actually plan to deal with it. But these are the kind of things that can take place. There's another situation. There we go. So this is, what is this? 13WMAZ.com. Warner Robins, woman arrested after choking slamming man into concrete. Destiny Lowe was charged with aggravated assault and false imprisonment after she allegedly choked and pinned a man during an argument. Let me see if I can enlarge this a bit. All right, this is dated June 11th of this year. This is in Georgia. A Houston County woman charged with attacking a man and sitting on them was given bond Tuesday after being arrested in the May 29th domestic violence case, according to court and police records. According to an incident report from the Warner Robins Police Department, deputies arrested Destiny Lowe, 33, and charged her with aggravated assault and false imprisonment after she allegedly choked, slammed, and pinned a man onto the concrete. According to the report, police arrived to a house on Andra Avenue where they found Lowe laying on a 27-year-old man outside. The report says the man was bleeding from his mouth. It happened after the two had gotten back from a Macon bar where they went earlier that night, according to testimony from Lowe. She said that they were in an argument when he grabbed her phone out of her hand. That led to Lowe allegedly choking the man with his hoodie. When the man tried hitting Lowe with her phone, she tightened his hoodie and slammed him into the concrete face first, according to her testimony. After pinning the man to the ground, Lowe asked someone inside the house to call 911. Lowe claimed that the situation stemmed from I guess that was supposed to be self-defense, fearful of attacks that might happen, according to the report. The man was taken into an ambulance after he wasn't responsive at the scene, despite no visible injuries. Right now, the man's status is unknown. Lowe was released on bond on June 9th, right? So there you go. Different types of violence, different examples of violence, right? Here's another.
One thing I've been having a hard time explaining to my son is women have the last say. So when you're up against a woman and it's you versus her, unfortunately, a lot of the times people are going to side with that woman. And that's a really tough conversation to like navigate with my son, because I feel like, how do you tell a boy, even if a girl hits you, yeah, you really can't hit her back. You have to have restraint. You have to, talk. Like, how are you telling a person how to react when
especially
it's
when
a
the other
reaction?
person could be dead wrong.
When it literally be dead wrong. Like,
wrong.
It just hurt my feelings a little to see, like, damn, I do pray different for my son. I do have to explain things differently because he's not always going to understand. And sometimes these things can come from a toxic masculine place. It's hard to say if a girl lies on you, they're going to believe it. It's hard to tell a boy child that, because it's like, how are we teaching right from wrong? Where's the justice in those situations?
All right. Unfortunately, it does take that for a lot of women to actually see how these situations work. Like, for example, I tend to find the women that I speak to that support my work the most tend to be women that are either married and really love their husbands, or they have sons. Without one of those two things in play, or maybe those who were raised with a strong, loving father. But short of those three, I tend to find that women often disconnect from what men are trying to say altogether, especially when it comes to looking at things from a male vantage point. I find many women are unable to do that. But, in this instance, she's talking about something most men can speak to, even in childhood. The whole question of not hitting girls, even when girls hit you. And the argument that you shouldn't respond, even in self-defense. But there's usually not a lot of clarity to that. There's no logic really applied. It's just, especially when you grow up around women, they just tell you can't hit a girl. And when you ask why, they usually don't have an answer. They just tell you can't, right? No matter what she's done. And this logic, I think, for younger generations of men or boys is not working the way it used to, because it doesn't make any sense. It just gives women carte blanche, power to pretty much do whatever the hell they want. And a lot of boys are not really going for that anymore. Right. But again, in these kind of instances, you want to point to solutions. And the solutions I keep coming back to are violence as a last resort for self-defense, recording as often as possible. Those have to remain constants in terms of navigating this. Because here's the thing. I talked in my last show about, things that women do to really push men into a sort of trap. Right? We talked about, 5 different ways that men experience relationships and problems that they try to avoid. And this is why so many men are avoiding relationships. But we also need to talk about how many women use violence very strategically. And I talked a little bit about this in that show as well. I did. I talked a little bit about how violence is strategically used in certain instances, right? But when it comes to women initiating violence, calling the police, and then telling them that you're violent, this is a strategy. This is a method that some use to gain position. And sometimes, just like with Marcellus Wiley, they'll use it just before a divorce, right? So that they can talk about how they were victims. And this, is hope that they hope that it'll, get them some sympathy. The judge, the jury, if there is one, will lean in their favor. So violence becomes very strategic because the public is very aware of female victimization, and especially from black men, black male threat. So this is an old trope that many women use very strategically against men. And this is why I'm telling men, I don't want to see you locked up. I don't want to see you fall into this trap. This is why you have to record everything. This is why you have to avoid violence unless in self-defense. And even then, try to record it. But your goal should be to leave the altercation altogether. Now, why do I say that? Because in many instances, you can lose years of sacrifice and work to get where you are. You can lose it in 30 seconds. By having the response that some women want you to have, which can end up getting you in a situation where you end up having to pay her, you lose custody of kids, all kinds of things happen. You go to jail, you lose employment, you lose housing, all kinds of things can take place. So I'm just saying, brothers, we got to be extremely strategic about how we negotiate violence, especially in regard to women, because at this point it's become a game. It's become, in some respects, a grift in a way where she knows she can do whatever she wants. And this is kind of the issue, right? Because in many respects, this should be a simple thing, but it's not always simple. And it's often used against us in some very problematic ways. And it's really sad in many respects because men are fairly simple in many, what it is most of us want is pretty simple. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show you a woman that's gonna break down, I'm gonna show you two women. One's gonna break down what it is that many men seem to want, and the other's gonna break down what women seem to want. All right. So check this lady out and listen to how she breaks this down. Even though she's talking to women, listen to what she says.
Ladies, I don't understand what the big deal is. You wake up, you roll it around in your mouth a little bit, you make him lunch, and you send him on his way. You have a whole 8 hours to yourself. So you clean a little, you make him dinner. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but you can lower the standards on the cleaning part. They don't need a super clean house. They're happy if it's tidy. Comes home, you give him a little something. What is that, like an hour and a half out of your day? Come on, it ain't that hard.
Now, I play her, even though the first time I saw this, I was rolling. I was just rolling because it was hilarious to me, right? The reason I decided to play that is because in the midst of all of these conversations about violence and about, the games people are playing, the traps that some of these women are trying to put men in, men fall for those traps in many respects because we want something that's very simple much of the time. And in the West, you can't even say it aloud without being called misogynist. So what many men have done is start to go overseas. And I actually do know a good number of passport bros who have gotten married or developed long-term relationships and had kids overseas. And they're actually at a point where they've been able to, what the old folks used to call it, sit a woman down, right? Where she's a stay-at-home mother taking care of their kids. And these are the kinds of relationships they end up having. What she just described in a given day is more often than not, what takes place with a lot of these brothers. So, even though it's coming from a strange source and all of that, and she's walking around outside, however she's dressed, the point of what she's saying is actually something I've seen men when they've been able to find it. And I've known men in the United States in the last 5 or 6 years who've managed to find a situation where they can do that. They didn't have to leave the country. But fundamentally, what she's saying ended up being true for them as well. Men don't have a whole long list of requirements and, requests and demands. Men are very simple. Not always easy, but simple in terms of what we're looking for. And she's trying to simplify it in this. But she's right. In many respects, she's absolutely right. But let's check out the other side of this, right? Move it over here. There we go. Let's see what is to be said about what women are looking for.
Women don't know what they want. They don't have a clue. Women say they want a masculine man, then they get a man that gives them boundaries and standards, and now he's too controlling. And then they say they want an emotionally available man, but then he's too soft and sweet. Now he feels gay. Like, literally, what do you actually want? Most women have no idea. They think they want the man that is the highly esteemed, highly respected, high earning, high value, masculine man. But I promise you, being with an entrepreneur or a business owner as a woman, if your love languages are quality time, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. Because not only do you have to hold for the vision that he has, but also a lot of the times he's not in the household to hold it with you. So if you want a man that has a bunch of time to give you, he's probably broke.
So is it true that women really want marriage, or do they just want to feel chosen?
I think the latter. I think most women just want to feel chosen.
I think so.
I don't think women know what they want. I don't. Most women, not all women, obviously.
All right, that's where that ended. But that clip I thought was interesting and important because it highlights many of the differences between large swaths of men and women. Women have made all kinds of demands on what men should do, how men should approach them, how men should talk to them, all kinds of things. Men, not so much. We remain very simple, and it still has not been something that women have chosen to understand. But at the end of the day, when we get back to this question of violence, I think what she talks about here is still important to that conversation. Because fundamentally, I think what it comes down to in many instances is a matter of control. if she can control you with violence, or if she can use your response to violence against you and villainize you in the eyes of the law. Either way, she controls the situation and ultimately you. And this is something I want men to become very savvy about dealing with. I mean, any of us can find ourselves in the wrong situation. It's life. It can happen to any of us. But at the end of the day, if we can find ways to stay on top of this, to be prepared to the best of our ability and avoid, being used, having these things used against us in court, going to jail, and necessarily losing on years worth of work and sacrifice, blood and sweat and tears, simply because there's a game being played against us. I want men to be strategically aware of that, because if they are clear about what they want, and it usually is something pretty simple, whether it be a sex-based relationship, whether it be a marriage of sorts, even kids, usually what men want is pretty straightforward. Women, on the other hand, it can be a very different thing. So that said, stay on top of it, fellas. Don't fall into the violence trap. Be very strategic on how you negotiate, violence. And if you find it present, my suggestion is to leave, right? Record and leave. In the relationship, navigate out of it, avoid violence that can be used against you. And stay aware at the end of the day of your wants, and even how your wants can be weaponized against you. Because if some women know that ultimately all you want is a simple relationship, they'll use it against you to control the situation. So just a thought. This one's a quick video. We're going to end it a little short, but I hope you guys get something out of it. And as usual, I'm looking for the comment section to hear what you guys have to say about this. All right. I'll let y'all later. Peace.